I was already late when I realized the platform sign didn't look right. I stood there for a second longer than I should have, briefcase cutting into my palm, watching the train doors close with a soft, indifferent sound. I stepped in anyway. That was my first mistake of the day, though it didn't feel dramatic enough to stop me. It felt small, manageable, like everything else I'd been telling myself for months. Inside, the carriage smelled faintly of metal and reheated coffee. I checked my phone. Wrong line. 2 stops past where I should have turned back. I exhaled through my nose and looked for a seat, calculating excuses, apologies, the exact tone I'd need when I finally walked into the office. I dropped into the empty seat beside a man in a dark coat. He was already turned slightly toward the window, hands folded, posture relaxed in a way that irritated me instantly. I hadn't even settled my bag when he spoke. "You're exactly on time." It took me a second to register that he was talking to me. "I'm not," I said, sharper than I meant to. "I'm late and on the wrong train." He didn't argue. He didn't smile either. He just nodded once, like I'd confirmed something for him. That annoyed me more than if he'd insisted. We sat in silence as the train moved. I told myself to ignore him. People said strange things all the time, self-help language, spiritual nonsense, casual intrusions disguised as wisdom. I stared at the map above the door, tracing the stops I didn't want to be on. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed he wasn't watching me. He wasn't watching anything in particular, just present, in a way that made my own agitation feel louder. "You always measure time like it's proof," he said after a while. I looked at him then. His face was lined, not old, but worn in a deliberate way, like someone who didn't rush expressions. His voice wasn't soft, but it wasn't authoritative either. It carried no urgency. "I don't know you," I said. "No," he agreed. "That helps." I considered moving seats. Pride kept me where I was. Or maybe curiosity. I wasn't sure which I trusted less. I told him I had a meeting I couldn't miss, that I'd already been warned about punctuality, that being late once had a way of sticking to you, no matter how hard you worked after. The words came out faster than I intended, like I'd been rehearsing them for myself all along. He listened without interruption. When I finished, he said, "You think momentum is the same as direction?" I laughed, once, without humor. "You're doing it again." "Doing what? Turning a mistake into a lesson?" He finally looked at me fully, then, "No, I'm pointing out that you already decided this morning would go badly before it actually did." The train slowed. An announcement crackled overhead, distorted but clear enough to understand. A signal issue ahead. This line would be stopping early. Passengers would need to disembark and follow instructions from station staff for alternate routes. Groans rippled through the carriage. People stood, checked phones, sighed loudly as if volume might fix something. I felt a familiar heat rise in my chest. This was exactly what I meant, I wanted to say to him. Proof, disruption, consequence. We stepped onto the platform with everyone else. Authority appeared in bright vests and practiced calm, directing us toward temporary exits, explaining delays with rehearsed patience. The order was unmistakable. There would be no negotiating with this. The stranger walked beside me for a moment, then slowed. "You'll take the bus," he said, not as instruction but observation. "It'll put you closer than the train would have." I shook my head. "That makes no sense." "It won't feel like it," he said. "That's different." We reached the stairs. He stopped. I didn't. "Why say that to me?" I asked, turning back despite myself. "On the train." He considered me for a moment, then shrugged lightly. "Because you were bracing for impact instead of looking around. That's it?" "It usually is." He didn't offer his name. He didn't wait for thanks. He turned and blended into the flow of people heading the opposite direction. I stood there longer than necessary, then followed the signs to the bus stop, guided by staff who didn't care about my internal resistance. The bus crawled through traffic, slower than the train would have been. I arrived at work later than I'd feared. The meeting had already started without me, and ended without me too. What waited instead was a message from my supervisor asking me to come by when I arrived. No anger, no reprimand, just a closed door and an unexpected shift in tone. The meeting I'd missed had been postponed, restructured. My absence meant someone else presented my work, poorly but honestly. Issues surfaced that I'd been quietly compensating for. The conversation that followed wasn't comfortable, but it was direct. Control didn't return to me, it redistributed. I left that office lighter, though not triumphant. Nothing had been fixed, but something had been named. On the way home, I watched trains pass without urgency. I thought about how often I'd mistaken speed for safety, how easily I framed disruption as failure instead of information. I never saw the man again, but sometimes when things stall or slip sideways, I remember the way he said it. Not reassuring, not prophetic, just precise. "You're exactly on time." And I sit with the discomfort of not knowing what that means yet.